to start off with something a little bit interactive. I want you guys to all close your eyes. Your iPads may help if you want to put those on. But I want you to close your eyes and imagine. I want you to imagine the coldest day you've ever experienced. I know we're in California. I'm from Detroit. It's not hard for me to imagine. But I want you to picture that freezing day, and you're sprinting out of your house towards your car. And as you're sprinting, all of a sudden the car disappears. The house behind you disappears, where you live, where your friends live, where your neighbors live. Take away your family. Take away everything, every place that you would go to if everything fell apart. I want you to open up your eyes. I don't want anybody falling asleep. What would you do? Where would you go? How would you deal with something like that? And how would you be able to deal with relying on the whims of others for everything? Telling you where you can sit, when you can eat, and even where you can sleep. Because I say this to make all of us realize how privileged we really are. We live in the wild west of creativity. Think about it, the camera that was just on stage, being in high school and coming up with a cure for cancer. We live in a time where anything can happen that we want to do. It's really exciting. But there are 3.5 million people in the US alone right now that aren't as privileged as us. And you can't categorize them as one group of people, that they're lazy, or they were addicts, or they just failed at life. And I'm here to talk about that. Because in Detroit alone, we have 20,000 homeless on the streets. That's counted. We have close to 36,000 estimated, and 64,000 abandoned buildings in just the city of Detroit alone. And what that leaves you with is, I'm not talking about just houses, I'm talking about full sky, like an entire skyscraper would count as one building, or an entire parking structure. And when you have a situation like that, you get this picture behind me. This is Melissa, one of the first people to ever receive a coat. But behind her, if you look at the building, I wish I could refocus a little bit, but if you look at that house, when you look at that house, she's living there, and she will tell you dead to your face that she's not homeless. But the worst part is she is paying to live in that house. She is paying rent to live in a house with no windows, no doors, no running water, and no heat. You have somebody that pays their disability check every month just to have a roof over their head. And some don't look as bad as this, but it's all the same scenario. I didn't know any of this when I started this project. I was at art school studying to be a product designer, and we spend our time designing fast, pretty, shiny things. And when a humanitarian group came in and said, all right, product designers, design to fill a need. I'm like, okay. All of us were floored. You know, I had ramen and a roof over my head, so most of my needs were being met. I was okay. But just walking out into Detroit, you can understand there are bigger needs than your own. So I started naively and very stupidly. I went to the worst and the most dangerous shelter in the city of Detroit on my own at 8 o'clock at night. And I went in there with the idea of maybe research. Maybe I'll hear what people want and what they need. And I showed up the first day in front of a crowd of 30 people sitting in chairs that only could keep the belongings that they had on their lap, and anything that couldn't fit on their lap was thrown out. And all they could do is sit and watch TV for 8 hours before being booted out for the next group. And it was the dead of winter. And they're like, okay. And the TV gets clicked off, and all you could hear was swearing for 15 minutes. And I'm just standing there with my little bundle of recycled goods, just like, don't kill me. And I asked him, like, I need your help. I'm not here to help anybody. I'm not here to save anybody. I need your help because I'm here to learn from you. I'm here to gain anything that I can to do this school project. And, of course, didn't get the best response. If you want to help us turn our television back on was the general theme. But I said, okay, I'll be back. And I came back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, every week for 5 months, sitting, listening, and talking to people. And within the first walk around the city, I saw a playground literally 20 yards away from that shelter that was covered in tarps and clothes and surrounded by needles, and somebody was living there. 20 feet away, you could see the shelter. And my big question, this was the start of the coat, was why would somebody do that? Why would they risk their lives? Why would they risk dying of hypothermia just to build a house for themselves when somebody was offering it to them for free 20 yards away? Why would you do that? And it's the same motivator that we all have. Did it for pride, did it for independence. They're like everybody else, they're like us, everybody. We're all the same. We all want to be able to take care of ourselves. And that's the same thing I heard over and over again. And I realized I wasn't designing a coat for the tangible need of just it being cold. I was designing because of an emotional need, of pride. And I had no idea where to go with it. I built the first coat with my mother. I learned how to sew. It took us 80 hours, the worst experience of my life. 80 hours to sew trash bags and 7 wool coats together to build a Frankenstein 20-pound coat tent. And I came back to that shelter and was so proud of it. I picked it up and I was like, look at what I made. They're like, okay, that's great, but it looks like a body bag. So I failed hard and fast, but at least I did it quickly. Built 3 more, kept on bringing it back, and before long I was known as the crazy coat girl. Friendly, they were smiling, it wasn't mean, hopefully, and I became known as this crazy coat lady that would show up. And at the end of the semester, what was I supposed to do? People had begun asking me, so when am I gonna get my crazy coat? When am I gonna get this? To me, as a product designer, like, never, this is a concept, I'm a student, nothing I do is meaningful. Like, why would you want anything? But that all changed. I was like, okay, so they actually want it. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm an art student. I know nothing about business, but I guess I'll run with it. I'll see what happens. And I started asking people, anybody, literally anybody, questions. How do I create a business? How do I do this? Because I realized I couldn't manufacture these on my own. I suck at sewing. I'm horrible. And I just, okay, what do I do next? And people were very generous with their answers of telling me the many ways in which I can fail, the many ways this idea was going to crash and burn, and maybe I'd get sued. And I'm like, all right, can you slow down? I'm taking notes. This is becoming my to-do list. And with that to-do list came the best constructive criticism of all from the shelter I started. This woman, been homeless for decades, screaming at me as I walk out one day, literally yelling at me saying, your coat doesn't matter, jobs matter. What you do means nothing unless you create jobs. And I realized that's true. Again, what was I gonna do, hole myself up in my basement with my grandmother making these? And everything changed. And I looked for money. I was like, okay, I have an idea. All I need is money now. That's it. I'll be able to go on. And in asking for money, I spoke to the CEO of Carhartt. I had no idea what I was doing. He had told me to show up with my concept. I show up with a giant white trash bag looking thing. And we sit and talk for an hour, and he says, what do you need? And let me put this image in your head, because I had created a business plan, but I was an art student. We're not good with numbers. I created a booklet of 27 pictures with a tiny little spreadsheet in the back saying all I needed was $1,600 to operate for a year. Thank you for all laughing. Nobody laughed at me when I showed it originally, which I wish they would have. But he saw something in me that I didn't. And he was like, okay, well, what do you really need? I'm like, I need industrial sewing machines. And he's, I need sewing machines. And he's like, well, what kind? I'm like, the industrial kind, the strong kind. And he's like, okay, there's the single, there's the double. I'm like, all right, I'll take double needles. It sounds 2's better than 1. I'll take those. And that was it. That was all I had to go on. Within a week, I had over 2 tons worth of sewing machines and fabric headed to my grandparents' house. I realized things needed to change. I worked with the shelter. And they said, okay, we'll give you a closet. Got a closet, and I hired my first employee, December 2010. She was 17 years older than me. Her name's Alicia. Within 3 months of hiring her, thanks to donations from the public, obviously not the $1,600, I was able to fund a full salary for her. And within 3 months, she had moved out of the shelter system entirely, got a new apartment, and had all 3 kids enrolled in charter schools. And her youngest son, Tabian, who's 6, was learning Japanese. That within 3 months. Thank you. And it was that moment that I realized, oh my God, this is not a school project anymore. And 2, I had created a job for myself, and in doing so, not only created a job for somebody else, but a better life system. I'm like, okay, now I know what I want to do. I want to create jobs for moms. I want to build these codes, get them out for free, and I want to create a better system around it. I had one image, and I've been sprinting at it ever since. And quickly, I'm going to call up a victim to come show you the newest version of this code. Now, if you want to wrap it, put the straps, put these guys, you can wear it as a bag, as a shoulder bag, so you gotta go.
Oh, yes.
There we go. So in the off season, when you're not freezing, which is rare in Michigan, you have this, you have a bag, and then if you want to undo it, we designed toggles that can be easily done and undone. So we've given out 2 outreach programs, 275. If you want to turn it. 275. This is a double extra large, and this is the coat we give out for free. All right, if you want to get inside. Outside layer is Tyvek, followed by Thin Slate and the liner from Carhartt that they donated a year ago. And the greatest thing about this coat is 2 things, actually. And if you want to open it up, we're actually going to get him to sleep on it on the stage. I'm going to pull down the sleeping bag, if you want to lay here. The greatest thing about this is if you pull the sleeves in, it becomes a pillow. But the greatest thing is that the people that we've been giving this to, these are severely mentally disabled, handicapped, sometimes on the streets for years. We haven't been giving it to them and just expecting them to use it. They've been giving feedback. And for the first time, we have people hunting down the outreach program that gave them the coat, just so they could tell them all of their design ideas, where we should add mittens. You're very tall, scrunch up there. Where we should add mittens. And the great thing also is that 2 weeks ago, I was in Aspen, doing this for Aspen Fashion Week, and the person with the $6 million home wanted one of these. All right. And if you want to get out, you're going to suffocate, Tuck. No, I don't want him to fall asleep. And what I realized with that is that we're going to be, as the goal of our project is to blur the status divide. I'm going to get the same coats on the streets as the people that are wearing it that can buy it. And that's it. Thank you.